lot of people, I think, who are listening like me, when it comes to this topic, it's so vast, it's so subjective, it's case to case. You can't just say all people with intellectual developmental disabilities are like this. Just like now they're discovering that just because someone has autism, it's not a defined term that manifests in a certain way, but there's so many things you got to understand within that particular issue. And I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because I think this is where it starts, when people know that you can't generalize, and that way, as a result, help can't be in a blanket form. I think this is the step-by-step approach, and for family members, of course, they need to know. And I think what you're doing through Nayi Disha is amazing, because that's what is required. Because if families don't know, number one, and they think that an antibiotic or a course of certain medication can correct these things, it's not the thing, because information is the most powerful thing to start with in a situation like this, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Information is key. Information is power. And for your listeners who are knowing about this topic for the first time, perhaps they can empathize with this, thinking about what happens when a new diagnosis of even of a illness is given. The first thing that family does is tries to figure out what does kidney failure really mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Because we don't know it unless we are sort of told about it, and that is where the journey starts. And it's very true in this situation, which is lifelong. And as you rightly said, every condition, I mean, umbrella term is intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is being used, but again, autism is different from Down syndrome is different from cerebral palsy, from ADHD, and so on. And within that also, every child is different, and hence, as you rightly said, you cannot have one blanket kind of support provided, and every family has to customize, innovate, and look at what would work best for their child.
No, which is amazing that someone like you and organizations like you exist. But if you want to look at just as a situation for India's future, if we have to approach this from a policy level, say to create institutions that can, complement the families, give them help in form of advocacy, in the form of education, in the form of accessibility on a larger scale, how does someone approach this, right? Because it's so, you need to be so knowledgeable, you need to be so sort of experienced with various cases to know what you're just saying. Even though you've experienced the sort of situation through your brother's situation. As a result, through Nayi Disha, you met so many other families, so you have a little more of a broader understanding of the intricacies. But many times when people are making policies, whether it's policymakers, whether it's people who are experts, who are the so-called experts, let's put it that way, it doesn't represent and do justice to what's required.
That's right. I think one of the primary things is we need to look through a different lens when we define what accessibility means.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility, yes, for many people with disabilities, it would mean having a ramp. It might mean having that, in various ways, the way we have defined accessibility traditionally. But when it comes to developmental disabilities, I believe accessibility at first step starts with access to information for the families.
Yeah.
Unless they have the information, they cannot take the right steps. And at a policy level, if you ask me, I think there is a lot of that right policies which are being put into place. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, we are talking about inclusion at schools, Right to Education Act, we are talking about it. But I believe what is happening is at the grassroots level. For example, you go to a typical school, the school, right from the principal to the teachers to the support staff at schools, they need to be educated and made aware about developmental disabilities. The social stigma which exists is out of fear and out of unawareness. So if we can make people aware and make them understand,
yeah.
These are such good policies which can actually be put to work. But at the ground level, we need to raise that awareness, provide that training to every teacher. And that's where it can really happen.